Well, up first, as I alluded to, folk artist Emma Cloney gets to take the stage back this week. After being diagnosed with lipedema, she had to step away. But the arts community rallied to raise money for her health care back in 2023. And now she's well enough to give back herself with a free concert tomorrow at the West End Cultural Centre. Emma Cloney is with us this morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
And also with us, Dale Brown. Good morning.
Good morning.
They are the New Customs. We will play some music momentarily, but first we wanted to update your story. How are you doing now with this lipedema? How's your health?
My health is good. I live with a chronic illness, so obviously there's the up days and the down days, but I can happily tell you that the majority of my days are up and capable, and I've received the treatment that I needed in order to get my life back, which is amazing.
What does that feel like? After, years off stage and right about now to step back on?
It's really liberating, and I gotta say that I never really doubted that I would get it back. Just that sense of determination when I found out that an illness that has no cure actually has really effective treatment. Accessing that treatment was really hard, but I always just knew that somehow we'd figure it out. And now to live in a place where the first thing I think about isn't how much it hurts or how much I can't do, and instead everything just feels kind of limitless, and I'm using my body and my brain for amazing things every day. So honestly, I feel really good about it.
I'll ask you in a moment to tell us more about lipedema, because you've not only learned about it, lived with it, but you've been fighting for awareness around it as well. But I want to ask you, Dale, how does it feel getting ready for her to be back on stage?
Oh, it's always wonderful playing music together and being able to share what we do. It's so exciting to be back to the West End Cultural Centre. It's where this all began for us almost 10 years ago. And it's always a pleasure to play that room.
What was it like for you when she became ill?
It's really, really hard to see anyone you care about or anyone you love having to go through, any hardship, especially something that you can't put yourself in that position. And so you stand by the people you love, and you just do what you have to do.
Yeah. You're her partner in music, but of course you're also her husband.
Yes.
I don't think I said that out loud on the mic here. What is lipedema then?
So lipedema is a genetically acquired connective tissue disorder, and basically what it is, it's not a pretty disorder. It causes fat that is not to be able to be lost by diet or exercise. That's incredibly painful to build up on the limbs. So usually from about the belly button down to the ankles, and depending on what type you have, it can also grow from the shoulders to the arms. And it affects almost exclusively women. It's debilitatingly painful. There's nothing that anyone did to cause it or make theirs worse. And it can be triggered at times of hormonal change. So puberty, pregnancy, menopause, and major stressful life events. And for me, I'd been living with it for a very long time, probably since puberty, but I didn't know. I had weight I couldn't lose. I mean, when you work in the arts and you're in the public eye, body image is really important. And I had done everything that there was to do. You couldn't run further. You couldn't, eat healthier. Mm-hmm. And it never changed my body. But following an injury while I was working as a nurse, which, yes, I also do, all of a sudden my illness trajectory just went straight north. And it was you couldn't ignore it anymore. I lost my mobility. I couldn't stand without feeling like I was standing on broken bones. And that's what started the journey towards finding out something really was wrong.
Tell me a little bit about the awareness, because you said right at the beginning there's no cure, but there are things you can do to help. So what has helped you the most, and what do you want people to be most aware of when it comes to lipedema?
Well, first off, I want you to be aware that it's incredibly common. We don't have specific prevalence numbers because it's not tracked in Canada, but it's estimated to be as common as 1 in 9 of those assigned female at birth. And we pass it down to our children. So
it's genetic.
It's genetic. And so when people think, oh, well, that's a rare disease, it's really not. It's rarely diagnosed and it's poorly understood. So much so that it's not actually taught in Canadian medical school, even though it's recognized by the World Health Organization. It's been known in literature since 1940. And we ask ourselves lots of questions about why do we not know so many things we should know about women's health.
So did you have to go internationally to actually get diagnosed and seek treatment then?
I did, yes. So that was one of the really big challenges and why we needed the community to help so much was the only access to the treatments. So to answer your original question, the treatments for lipedema include wearing custom compression garments, which help support the tissue and just reduce pain. Nothing, again, is curative, but helps manage. Things like eating an anti-inflammatory diet, working on stress management, getting in the pool, doing aquatherapy. But the most effective intervention, and especially at the stage that I was at where I needed to have my mobility preserved, is a lymphatic-sparing form of liposuction, which is in no way cosmetic, which takes the diseased tissue out of the limbs. And that can only be done by international specialists at this time.
Does it grow back?
Statistically, we've seen that it doesn't. We have 12-year-out long-term studies that show that, but like everything in all things, we need more data over a longer time. But for now, it looks like no.
I'm saving time to play some music here and talk about the concert for sure. So I just want to mention a couple things that you've been doing, if I may, because you actually took this advocacy for, pretty far here. I mean, you and 11 others formed a charitable organization, Lipedema Canada. I know you're working with the federal government and the provincial government. Health Minister Zone Massaguer is going to be the first to have a Lipedema Awareness Day here, first province in Canada.
Yes.
So you've been doing all of those things behind the scenes. I want to ask both of you, before we play this music, though, back to this concert, how's it going to feel for you to be on stage with your wife tonight and be able to thank the people that, in many ways, got her through what would have been for your family, I suspect, a really difficult time?
It's an indescribably good feeling.
Tomorrow, the concert.
Yes. It's an indescribably good feeling just to be able to play music, to give back, and this will actually be our first show as a married couple. So that's
Hey, you guys just got married when?
October.
Last month.
Congratulations.
I feel like we've been away from each other more than we've been together since we got married because there was so many, 2 lipedema conferences. I just got back from presenting at the World Lipedema Congress in Rome. And so I feel like I should have just sent you a postcard that said, I'll meet you on the stage.
Wish you were at the West End.
Wish you were at the West End.
And I guess what's it going to make you feel like to give back to the community that helped you so much when you were at your sickest?
It's really emotional. There was a benefit concert that the West End hosted for me back in 2023. And it was because the province originally had said, yeah, we'll pay for your treatments. And then they said, actually, we changed our minds. And when that happened, they took away my access to healthcare and my ability to get better. And so to be able to look back at those faces, this time not from the audience, but to stand on the stage and sing for them is going to be powerfully emotional, but so much fun, and I can't wait to do it.
Which song do you think is maybe gonna, I don't know if anything will bring you to tears. I shouldn't project that, but it would bring me to tears, so maybe I'm gonna, but which song will be the most maybe meaningful to you when you think about the messages in your music?
Gosh, it's hard to say. There's so many of our songs that are connected to the experience of traveling and getting to live the life that sometimes feels so far away now, between COVID and the timing of my illness. But the ones about being across the country, Hey Little Bird.
Which one are you listening to, yeah?
Yeah, I can hear it in the background. It makes me emotional. Every time we play McCarthy's, we fall apart. But I think there was one song that started it all for Dale and I, and it wasn't even ours. We met at the West End Cultural Center and formed our band in the parking lot after Dale played this incredible tune by Oliver Shore called A Song for All Seasons. And it's just this hauntingly beautiful fiddle sound. And I think as soon as I hear that sound hit the stage, it's all going to hit me all at once.
Thank you both for being here this morning.
Thank
all
you.
the best with your health, the awareness about lipedema, and the show tomorrow.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
So that tune you'll have to wait for tomorrow night live, but you can hear Hey Little Bird. That's Emma Cloney and Dale Brown, the new Customs. They will play that free show at the West End Cultural Center tomorrow at 6 o'clock in collaboration with Arts Accessibility Network Manitoba. Let's hear the rest of Hey Little Bird on CBC.
Hey little bird, can't stay on my window pane. Frozen like a picture, captured in a frame. The great big world outside will just pass you anyway. So spread your wings and fly and come back again someday. So spread your wings and fly, come back again someday.
Just touching a little bit of a Hey Little Bird from the new Customs on CBC. Next on the show, let's build on a story you might have heard on World Report about people leaving to go south. Canadian snowbirds finding an escape from Canada's frigid winters. This year, though, things are expected to look a little bit different. And CBC's Julia Wong reported yesterday with me all about it.
Good morning.
So what made you want to look south?
You know, it's been a year since U.S. President Donald Trump was reelected. It's almost been a full year since we started to hear threats over tariffs, comments about Canada becoming the 51st state. So we wanted to get a sense of what impact that has all had on snowbirds specifically. You know, not just Canadians who are going down for a casual trip to the U.S., but Canadians who will spend a lot of time in the U.S. For decades, there's been a history of Canadians going down to places like Arizona, Florida, and California, and they'll be there for months at a time, putting thousands of dollars into those economies. So our team traveled to Florida in early November, and we went around to several different communities just trying to get a sense of how they've come to rely on snowbirds.
We've done a couple of individual interviews here with Manitobans who've sold their properties, one actually in Florida. I'm curious what you heard from snowbirds.
Yeah, a few different things. You know, I spoke with Joanne Rowe of Toronto, and she retired 10 years ago, and that's when she decided she wanted to escape the winters, and she wanted to rent a condo in Fort Lauderdale, Florida for 3 months, and for very understandable reasons. You know, the hot weather there, she had views of the beach, she was making some great American friends, but then the trade war started, and those 51st state comments came, and she started to feel really uneasy. She felt like Canada wasn't being appreciated. Her friends would say about the 51st state comments, oh, that's just a joke. And she's like, I don't really see it that way. And she decided to act on how she felt. And that's when she decided to change where she vacations as a snowbird.
Lots of people were talking about how we cut out American products and this and that. So in my small little way, I could change my vacation for 3 months, which is a lot of money when you talk about food and things you buy during that time and supporting American economy. I could go to Puerto Vallarta.
So Ro there saying she's going to go to Mexico. We heard that from some other snowbirds as well. But, you know, that isn't the case for everyone. When we were in Florida, we ran into snowbirds who were already there from Quebec, from Ontario. And these people, they have property in Florida. We're talking condos, we're talking houses. And they said, we don't like Canadian winters, and we're also not going to let politics get in the way of how we enjoy our retirement. So we went to this community called Maple Leaf Golf and Country Club. And they have very deep Canadian ties. You know, there's even a Canadian flag that flies at the entrance of this community. We saw some Blue Jays flags when we were there. We saw some Maple Leafs jerseys when we were there. And it's very Canadiana. And we ran into Silvio Conte from Ontario, and he bought a house there in 2020.
We enjoy coming down. We don't enjoy the winter. And I'm not going to let one individual dictate what makes us happy. So it didn't change anything for us.
So it didn't change his travel behavior, but what was really striking in my conversation with Conte was he said when he crossed the border and he was driving from Ontario down to Florida, he actually took off his front license plate and he was trying as best as he could to back in backwards to parking spots because he didn't want people to see where he was from. And I asked him, why are you doing this? This is like kind of a drastic measure, isn't it? And he said that he had heard these stories about Canadians being targeted. He heard these stories about their vehicles being targeted. So he thought, you know what? I think I'm just going to take this little extra step to try to avoid any extra possible aggravation.
Actually, the Manitoban that I was referring to that, sold his place in Florida also talked sort of about that, different reception when the Canadian plates were spotted. That was his point of view, at least. So who you talked to some people leaving, some going somewhere else. What impact is this all having on the Florida communities?
Yeah, I mean, it's affecting them in very real ways. Take real estate, for example. We talked to several different realtors in different parts of the state, and they say when it comes to these Canadians who own property down there, well, the exchange rate may be one reason that they're selling, but they also say that political rhetoric is for sure another. They're seeing more Canadians selling those properties that they have in the state. I spoke with Zachary Starch, and he's originally from Canada. He's from St. Catharines, Ontario, but he works as a real estate agent in Fort Myers, and here's what he had to say about what he was seeing.
Last winter, at the end of last winter, we had a big bump in Canadians, a lot of people in general, but Canadians in particular, listing their homes for sale. Unfortunately, like I said, it was a buyer's market. A lot of those listings have since expired. So people are, I think, thinking of selling again. They just want to see what happens, but they also know that it is, to be honest, not the best time to sell as far as the real estate market is concerned.
We also spoke with Josh Levy, and he's the mayor of Hollywood, which is a city sort of in between Miami and Fort Lauderdale. And we talked about some state tourism data that shows, the most recent data shows a 20% drop in Canadian visitors from the same time last year. So we talked about those numbers, and we talked about his worries over that fall in visitorship.
It means hundreds of millions of dollars of reduced economic impact and inflow into Florida. Clearly, it's meaningful. But we want our Canadian snowbirds to know and our Canadian visitors to know that Florida remains the welcoming place that they all know.
How is what we've just heard there, the decrease in business, how does it trickle down to local businesses?
Yeah, I mean, in short, it's hurting their bottom line. They're seeing fewer Canadians walk through the door. We went to the Atlantic Hotel and Spa, and it sits along the beach in Fort Lauderdale. And they've always had a very strong Canadian visitor presence since they opened in 2004. They tell me that Canadian snowbirds would stay, between 3 to 6 months at a time. And that's like a long period of time, right? Like that's a lot of money that they're giving to the hotel. That's a lot of money that they're also spending in the surrounding community. But since the start of this year, they've actually seen Canadian occupancy at the hotel fall 5%, and there are a lot of worries over what that means. I spoke with Amy Faulkner, the sales director at the hotel.
I had someone from Edmonton in the elevator, and I said, "Oh my gosh, thank you for being here. I'm so glad that you're here." And that particular person said, "We'll always come." And then I have other Canadians that I've reached out to that have stayed here before that are not coming back.
So this is a big worry. This is a big concern for Faulkner. I mean, her job is to bring in clients to the hotel, but the situation for her is so serious. She's actually going to other countries. She's taking these business trips to places like Brazil. She might be going to Argentina and Colombia to try to drum up new business, find new clients to make up for that shortfall that they're seeing. And it's not just these big hotels that are seeing the impacts. We're talking to mom and pop shops as well. So there is this restaurant called Dairy Bell. It was started by a Quebec couple in 1998. And they sell things, like hot dogs and burgers and fries and ice cream. And of course, they're from Quebec. They sell poutine. And a lot of people, when we were there at this restaurant, spoke French. Their peak season is a snowbird season from November to April. The vast majority of their clients during that time are Canadian. But the co-owner there, Francois Grenier, he's expecting a drop in business this year compared to last because of that change in snowbird behavior.
So that is Julia Wong from CBC, her report about American snowbirds and Canadians who are choosing not to go down south for the season. You can hear more on World Report. Well, Canadians will not be going to the polls this winter now that Mark Carney's budget has passed, as we've been sharing in the House of Commons. Now, here's the moment when that happened, the vote results being read out by the Speaker of the House.
Okay. The table will now compile the results of the vote.
Yeas pour 170, 170. Nays contre 168, 163.
So in case you missed that, because you can hear all the cheering, 170 to 168, the budget passes. The Liberals, though, needed help. Green Party leader Elizabeth May and the abstention of a few MPs, Conservative and NDP MPs, made it happen. To the NDP party next, we want to hear a bit from NDP leader Don Davies, interim leader. He spoke with reporters about the abstentions of the two in his party. He says that the budget does simply not meet the needs of Canadians. But he was pressed after the budget. One of the reporters was asking him if this was in line with his party's values. He says after speaking with people across the country, it was clear there's no appetite for another federal election so soon after we went to the polls.
We have decided to put the interests of our country first, to vote against the budget, but to help prevent an election. Canada is facing instability and overlapping crises. In these challenging times, we must put our country's well-being first above partisan interests. When the next election comes, whenever that may be, Canadians will hold Mark Carney responsible and to account for his record and for the choices that he made in this budget. But today, New Democrats are choosing stability over political games.
It's not just partisan interest, though. I mean, your party's abstentions just allowed for the government to cut thousands of public worker jobs. How do you square that being the party of workers?
Well, this is a Liberal budget, and this is what happens when you vote for Liberals, is these are the kind of neoliberal, neoconservative policies that you get. And we've opposed this budget. That's why we stood up and we're voting against the budget. We can't support it. They did not earn our support. And we tried to make changes to this budget. But at the same time, again, Canadians clearly don't want an election right now. And given the serious economic challenges facing our country right now, we don't think that it would be good for our country. So New Democrats have expressed our opposition to this budget. And we have said that we are not going to force an election right now that clearly Canadians don't want and our country doesn't need.
Was this about your electoral prospects?
Go ahead.
Was this about your electoral prospects, the fact that the NDP can't afford an election right now?
Not at all. No, I mean, this is not about us. This is about Canadians, and that's why the NDP, we took our time last week to go across the country to talk to Canadians, our constituents, and find out what they said and what they wanted. And it is very clear. There is a strong consensus in this country that Canadians do not want an election basically 6 months after the last one. They also are feeling the precarity and the instability of the moment. We have Donald Trump still menacing our country and serious economic issues. Canadians want us to be in Parliament addressing those serious issues, and so that's why we're taking the position that we're doing.
That is John Davies, interim leader of the federal NDP, talking about the budget yesterday, which did pass, and that meant that two of his NDP MPs abstained. We have Ryan Tumilty to talk about this morning, political reporter with the Toronto Star, joins us most Tuesdays. Good morning.
Good morning.
Before we ask you to react to Don, I don't know how you were feeling yesterday. I was watching. There was a moment where I'm like, are we going to go to an election here? What'd you make of how the vote shook out?
Yeah, I will say when Don Davies stood up and voted no, a lot of us were wondering what was going to happen next. Because quite frankly, the expectation was there going to be a few abstentions in the NDP caucus, and the expectation was that he was going to be one of them. So it was quite the moment. Lots of drama. Interestingly, as much as there was lots of drama, there was also a real expectation in every party that in the end the budget was going to pass, and every party but the Bloc played a role in that yesterday. So it was quite an interesting outcome.
Tell me a little bit about how you feel like you just heard from Don Davies there and how he's positioning why the NDP did this. Can they have it both ways when it comes to how their actions will be perceived by the public as the party of workers? Will people, I guess NDP voters think, okay, they were in a tough spot. We actually didn't want to go to the polls, perhaps? How do you think this will be perceived?
Yeah, I mean, I have yet to meet a Canadian who is eager for an election over Christmas time. So I think in that way, the NDP is reading the public sentiment. There is not a lot for the NDP in this budget in the sense of, some of the programs that they advocate for or things like that. And certainly the Liberals didn't seem to be in much of a negotiating mood. But I'll also say that there were no poison pills in this budget either. You weren't seeing the Liberals talk about ending the dental care program, for example, or tightening labor restrictions or something like that. So they weren't trying to take away any of the concessions that the NDP won in the last parliament. They say they are committed to all of those programs. So that is, it might be small comfort to NDP voters, but that is something. And I think, that allowed the NDP to see a path forward.
I will ask about Elizabeth May in a moment, but I want to move to the Conservatives. There were two Conservative MPs, is that correct, that abstained as well? Can we talk about the Conservative vote?
Yeah, absolutely. So the two MPs that abstained, everyone else voted no, but the two MPs that abstained were Shane Stubbs from Alberta. She was apparently on a medical leave. And then Matt Genereux from Edmonton. And I think there's a lot of questions about his abstention. Of course, there has been lots of reporting that he was preparing to cross the floor to the Liberals, that he backed away from that. But he has abstained since. He has not voted with his party or at all really since. The Conservatives were not angry about that yesterday. You didn't hear them talking about removing him from caucus or anything like that. But I think there is a question about how long this goes forward and what kind of tensions it might create in the Conservative caucus.
Will the Conservatives be quietly happy that this didn't go through? Because the election timing, one could argue right now for them wouldn't have been good either. Will they give them a pass because of that, or is that just not the way party politics works, too cutthroat that they're going to hold them to account?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, yesterday they said that there would be no caucus discipline for the vote that he missed. Certainly that's not normal. So I think maybe they are giving him some sort of a pass. Or they're also recognizing that as someone who's resigning, there's not a lot they can do. So I think maybe they're eager to avoid the drama in that regard.
So go ahead, Ryan. Sorry.
Yeah, so I think it'll just be a matter of wait and see on that front. Certainly, I think the party is prepared to move on from all of this. And I don't think if the Conservatives really wanted to bring the government down, they could have done so with their own motion 2 weeks ago, made it more clear, made it more, we have no confidence in the government without sort of the frills that they put on it. So I don't think anyone was eager for this election.
Let's talk Elizabeth May then. She said early in the day she would vote for the budget, so it was not a surprise when she got up, got the big cheer from the Liberals when she did so. Did she receive any concessions from the PM to get her support in the House?
Yeah, we saw that concession play out live, really. She got an extra question in question period. She wasn't supposed to get a question yesterday. She used that to ask the Prime Minister about his commitment to the Paris climate targets. And she got an answer that I guess was satisfactory for her, because then she changed her view on the budget. Just last week, she theatrically pulled it out of her purse and stomped on it and said that's what she thinks of the budget. Ultimately, I think she was also reading the public mood, that this is not an election anybody wants, that people are prepared to move forward without going to the polls, that they don't want this. She acknowledged that it's possible she was being naive by taking the Prime Minister's word for it on the Paris climate targets when there are so many measures in the budget that she disapproves of. But she was prepared to take that.
Thanks for your time as always, Ryan, and your analysis. Appreciate it.
All right. Take care.
That's Ryan Tumilty live with us on CBC via Zoom, political reporter with the Toronto Star, one of the regular guests we have on the show to analyze what's happening in Ottawa. So if you want to read more about the budget, cbc.ca is where you can go and check out the vote. I know we had to do that about 3 times this morning, just checking the math. Who abstained, who voted for and against, and who just wasn't there and why. So you can read all about the breakdown and then read more about the budget as well and what is coming and not coming for to support your life here in Manitoba. When it comes to transfer payments, supports they're going to be giving to different projects and such. You can find it all online with analysis. If you work, you've probably had a workplace moment of conflict at one time or another, or maybe more than a moment. A report from Myers-Briggs Company found that employees spend more than 4 hours a week dealing with conflict. So we started a series trying to figure out what you think about it, how often it happens, and how it gets dealt with. Yesterday on the show, we did hear from a number of Winnipeggers. All of them said they've dealt with conflict in their workplaces. But we also heard from registered psychotherapist and behavioral sciences professor Laura Kavanaugh. She specializes in workplace conflict. Here's a bit of what she had to say.
I just want to be clear that we're not talking about really egregious violations of workplace behavior. So we're not talking about harassment or abuses of power, but just like people who are hard to work with. But what the research shows is that what predicts workplace conflict, both task-related and interpersonal actually, is the level of workplace support. But it can also be really unclear expectations and a lack of clarity among the workplace culture. So poorly communicated expectations, blurred hierarchy where no one really knows who's in charge, people who have shared authority but differing goals, goals that are unclear or poorly defined, right? So a lot of it is miscommunication or a lack of clarity.
Our next guest has been helping companies here in Manitoba resolve workplace conflicts since 2003. David Falk is a senior mediator and trainer at Facilitated Solutions. That's a Winnipeg-based workplace conflict management firm. And he joins us live via Zoom. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thanks for weighing in on our series here. I saw you listening to Kavanaugh describing the nature of workplace conflicts. Does that sit with you? Like, what typically leads a company to reach out to you for an intervention?
Sure. What she described rings very true. In our work, probably the most common denominator is things that happen that land poorly, that people start generating assumptions about other people's motives. And that tends to start the cycle going in terms of once you start thinking that someone has negative motives for why they did something that caused you hurt or harm or frustration, people start, withdrawing trust, building up their own defensiveness, and doing things that start a whole cycle of actions and reactions that can be quite counterproductive.
And are they building up that whole cycle of actions and reactions and losing that trust after they have talked to the person about it? Or does the assumption wheel begin and then people actually don't get in the same room early enough?
Oh yeah, no, people seldom talk about things, unfortunately. There's so much avoidance and so much certainty. And one of the challenges that I was listening to your earlier resource person, they talked about how it's usually about miscommunication. And that is often true. However, often people don't believe it's about miscommunication. They're pretty sure that they know what the problem is, and the problem is the other person. And they've done a diagnosis on their own. They're convinced the other person's harassing them or bullying them, or since Trump's been in our zeitgeist, that the person's a narcissist. And those are these fairly significant assumptions that people lock into and become increasingly convinced that that's the reason why the other person is saying or doing what they're doing, as opposed to acknowledging that you might be right. I get it is a possibility, but the odds are, not necessarily that great, that you could also be wrong. Like, what if it is a simple misunderstanding? So often a lot of our work is helping people have long overdue conversations that they probably should have or could have had weeks, if not months, if not in some cases years earlier, to try to unwind and figure out, hey, how is it that we're here? And what do we need from each other to be able to kind of reset trust and reset our ability to kind of work effectively with each other?
Well, when it comes to workplace conflict, one of the things that you sometimes hear is that in any exchange, it might be about, it's about impact, not intent. So you can acknowledge the impact, not necessarily the intent, because then that could lead you to becoming defensive. But obviously, it should be also about understanding intent, because as you said, if you assume the intent is more nefarious than it might have been, you won't get anywhere anyway. How do you mediate around that idea? Impact, not intent.
Yeah, one of the things that I think a lot of us have been taught back in the day is how to be assertive, how to describe people's impact. And that's fine. It's a time and place to do that. The missing piece for a lot of us is that we're not necessarily curious about what did the other person actually mean. I know what you said. I know how it impacted me. The one piece of the equation that I don't know for sure is what your actual purpose was, what your goal was, the reason why you or your team said or did what they did. And so being able to lead with a bit of curiosity, starting a conversation with some questions as opposed to declarations of you said this and it had this impact on me or on my unit or on the operation. Starting off by being able to actually get the intentions on the table and privileging both the impact and the intentions can be really helpful.
Can you give us some scenarios without naming anyone, of some of the conflicts that you've helped mediate over the years? Or maybe pick one that's pretty common?
Sure. Here's in seniority-based workplaces, unionized workplaces. Someone is dragging their heels on declaring annual vacation, and they happen to have 3 weeks more of seniority than you do. And why are they dragging their heels? And we can all start filling out imaginations of, well, they're doing it just because they're rubbing their 3 weeks in seniority in my face. Well, that might be true, but that might not be true. You don't know for sure. But if you start thinking that it's true and you start acting that way, and you might start pressuring your colleague to, hey, you got to declare your vacation. Oh, I'm going to describe impact. I'm getting frustrated that you're doing this. And it can lead to a whole power struggle versus what's going on. In one case, the one person's partner had a new employment situation, was no longer had seniority in their employment because it wasn't a promotion type opportunity. Is reason that they had new employment was something that maybe I had a little bit of embarrassment with. And so they didn't want to share that with their colleagues. And sure, you don't have to. It's not your, there's privacy issues going on there. At the same time, not sharing anything had a different consequence because it left people with their conspiracy theories about why their colleague was kind of lording over their 3 weeks of seniority over their colleagues. So being able to help people unravel things. And that one, ironically, a case like that had chased all the way up where other people try and jump in and fix. So the supervisor tries to fix it and it doesn't go well. And then the union gets involved and tells that supervisor to stop pressuring their team members to declare because they know the rules. And Then management gets involved and tells that union staffer to stop bullying their own members. And by the time we get involved, head of HR is involved, the president of the company is involved, and they're having a bit of a proxy war about two people that are frontline technicians who need to sort out their vacation schedule. And they're not even in the room. So sometimes we need to kind of dismiss a few folks and get the right people in the room to have the right kind of conversation.
You said a couple of things in this conversation that I think are really current. So one of the things you said is the term. You said since Trump came on the scene, people are using the term narcissism. We hear all these sort of trends and terms come in and out depending on what's going on in the world. And also generations will have different views on what is... what you would approach a coworker with versus what you go to HR with versus what you raise with your boss, maybe behind closed doors. How do you navigate that? Like, how much of a challenge is it right now that people won't talk to each other? Let's just start with that. But that they will, make those assumptions and make things bigger, quicker. Is that a trend, or what are you noticing for the trends?
I'm not sure if that's a trend. That's been a through line through the 30 years that I've been working in this space, of people being hesitant to have the honest conversation. I think one of the things that we have been trying to help leaders and employees really lean into is start by trying to understand your own default settings. We all have patterns when it comes to dealing with conflict. Some of our patterns we learned under less than ideal situations of our own stress growing up in our families or our early employment situations. And so we learned a pattern. It might not be terribly functional. So if you got some self-awareness of what is your default setting, given your personality, given who you are, that's great. Have some self-awareness. And then have some situational awareness of what am I actually dealing with? And then figure out how can you show up as needed in this moment to have the right kind of conversation about the right kind of stuff with the right person. And often the temptation is to talk to everybody but the person you need to have the conversation with. It's one thing to go and, kind of think through and get some coaching support from a friend or from a supervisor. That's one thing, but often we're not even having those conversations. We're more venting about people, and the person that we need that has some missing information, who could tell us what they actually meant by their email that they sent, or that could tell us what they meant by a comment that they shared at a stand-up meeting that we took offense to. The person who has the missing information is often the last one to know, the last one that we talk to, which is really a shame. It's when it's you that is the person who is taken the wrong way, and you find out that everyone else knows about the situation. It adds another layer to loss of trust within the workplace.
How big of a problem, this is the last question, although I could ask 10 more. How big of a problem is lack of training for those that are supposed to deal with these issues? So the HR professionals perhaps, or the senior managers and such, because we heard yesterday that that's a big challenge. So you're talking about having the right people in the room.
Yeah.
But there's also navigating a whole world of things that, maybe your boss doesn't have a psychology degree. I mean, that's kind of where we're at,
difficult
right?
Conversations are difficult. So absolutely, there needs to be some training and support for that. And communication, I remember one of the people I studied with, he said, the more I learn about communication, the more I'm amazed that we understand each other at all, because it's so easy for things to get lost through the various kind of filters and biases and complexities that's involved in just speaking and hearing and actually having meaningful connection. And so increasing one's capacity and ability through training is super helpful. And probably about a third of our business is involved in equipping leaders and staff members with those type of tools.
Thank you very much for your time this morning, David. Appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Thanks for a chance to talk.
So much to think about there, right? David Falk, Senior Mediator and Trainer at Facilitated Solutions, a Winnipeg-based workplace conflict management firm. Now, I don't know if you want to weigh in on this. Have you been working for a long time? Do you think that the nature of conflict in workspaces has changed over time? If so, what are the new things that you're noticing? How have you been dealing with them? Or if you're a manager, how do you manage? How have you been managing through conflict solutions? And maybe if you're a new employee, what do you bring to the workplace around this? The new thinking around when to approach things that you perceive as conflict. Yesterday, I found that interesting. That question's coming from hearing about how some of the generational divides are different, where older generations would have, no matter what happened, never, said anything to their boss, maybe in situations where they even should have, where younger generations are quicker to say, hang on a minute, that's not right. There is an issue there. But how is that navigated? Workplace conflict, lots to talk about. 725-788-3205. Today, the provincial government will open the Manitoba Legislative Assembly with the speech from the throne. So a senior government source tells CBC it's going to talk about sick leave. Specifically in the speech that employees would only be required to provide a doctor's note after being off work for more than 7 calendar days, as you heard Heather reporting. Now, it's something that Doctors Manitoba has been advocating for. CBC's Ian Frey spoke with Doctors Manitoba President Nichelle Desilets.
Sounds fantastic to me. I haven't seen anything in writing. And of course, we want to wait and see what the government's direction is on this. But for at least a year now, we've been advocating for either restricted or ideally completely eliminated sick notes to verify illness, because it's not a productive use of an unwell patient's time who should be at home resting and recovering, nor of a physician's time, nor of the taxpayers' dollars.
If I was reading correctly, 5 or 6 notes a day, usually from a family doctor?
That is not outside of the realm of normal. We estimate that at least 600,000 sick notes are requested of the healthcare system every year in Manitoba. And what that translates to is probably about the equivalent of 300,000 appointments that are used for these purposes. And that's based on our estimate of what our members report that they are seeing in requests for sick notes, as well as how long our members report that it takes to see someone who is only requiring a sick note. And if we look at that 300,000 appointments, you could argue that that is the equivalent of adding, several dozen doctors to our workforce. And we know right now that that's the number one thing that physicians care about, is adding more doctors to our workforce, and patients care about that too. Patients care about access to their doctor, so that number of visits is really the reason why we care about it. Is that's taking time away from patients who need necessary medical care in this environment where we have a doctor shortage. After being away from work for, let's say, 1 or 2 weeks from an illness, many people need a note saying that they can go back to work. And when this is from, something like influenza, where, you might be sick for a week, but there's no, the treatments are what people naturally know they need to do. And there's not a lot of other treatments to define the timeline with, but they end up in the office asking for a note before they can go back to work.
This law might not change that last piece, no? Like if you've been gone for a week or 2.
We'll see. I mean, I haven't seen anything in terms of proposed legislation. We've been advocating for all sorts of, reductions in unnecessary paperwork, and we've consulted broadly with the public, employers, HR experts, and there's a fairly good consensus that from the majority of stakeholders that these notes aren't really that useful and are not the best way of doing things. But it's culturally kind of ingrained in our workplace dynamics and in the healthcare system and in societal expectations. There are provinces across the country that have made some movement in this. So we are grateful for any small step that can help go in the right direction. Back during COVID, Public Health issued a recommendation that no employer could ask for sick note documentation for a specified amount of time, because they wanted to reduce the number of people going to a doctor or a clinic or an emergency room with symptoms to prevent spread. That was great. That was totally appropriate. It worked really well, but unfortunately we regressed after that and went back to old habits. We don't know what the government is going to be looking at what the specifics of this. We appreciate that they have looked hard at the advice and the recommendations that we've made. And you're absolutely right. It's not going to, have all the rules ingrained in it, but change can take time, especially as we navigate this, like I said, societal change and way of thinking. If Manitoba did have a ban of 7 days, that detail alone, if that is the case, it would put us from last in the country in terms of legislation around sick notes, and it would put us near the front in terms of most appropriate restrictions in terms of bans.
I think I spoke to labor and a business person, and they both credited Doctors Manitoba or advocating for this, pushing for this, getting a consensus? How does that feel?
Well, I'm excited as a family doctor and as an emergency room doctor, and I'm really excited for my patients because a lot of patients realize that they don't really need to be in the doctor's office asking for this paperwork, and it's a burden for them too. I'm really grateful for the collaboration with the different stakeholders that have unified on these recommendations. It's allowed us to have a stronger message. It's one thing, for doctors to identify something that is could be done better, but the fact that we have stakeholders from the other side of the argument, presumably, also on board, that just shows us that we're in the right direction and that we're asking for the right thing and that this really is the right thing to do.
That was CBC's Ian Frey speaking with Doctors Manitoba President Nichelle Desilets about what is expected to be in the throne speech today. A senior government source tells CBC they're going to be talking about sick leave and making a change so employees would only be required to provide a doctor's note after being off work for more than 7 calendar days. If you want to read more about the story, cbc.ca/Manitoba. If you want to hear more about the throne speech, that's later today here on CBC. We're going to turn our attention to programming about your bottom line because Statistics Canada's latest figures on inflation show that the rate settled down to 2.2% last month. Prices at the pump have been a big help in lowering that number. Gas was down 9.4% in October. This is something that Prime Minister Cloney took credit for yesterday in the House of Commons just before the budget vote.
Mr. Speaker, today is a good day. Inflation is down 2.2%. It's for almost 2 years it's running within the Bank of Canada's target. Mr. Speaker, today this is a good month.
And yet, for some, it doesn't feel like a good month. Interest rates might be stabilizing, but after several years of high inflation, affordability remains a huge challenge for a lot of people in Canada, especially at the grocery store. CBC News talked with grocery shoppers in Ontario about their prices and how food costs are affecting their budgets.
Oh, the cost was $134. The grocery prices been rising a lot. And I usually spend like $80 a week, but these days I have to spend like around $200 or $300 a week. It's a lot going on these days, but it's even it's better than go to the restaurant now because if you go to a fine dine restaurant, it costs you more too. I think so. I like vegetables, I like meat, so that's very essential for human beings. So I have to survive with this thing. So I don't go to the bar anymore. I just go to the restaurant like maybe once a month, and also I think I don't go too much online shopping these days too. Basically everything is going up, so we have to survive.
Everything's more expensive. What you used to buy like stew beef. You used to get stew beef for like $2. Now you're paying $5-6 on sale. Prime rib we used to be able to get for $5-6 a pound. Now it's $9, $10, $12, and that's on sale prices. Everything is just more expensive. We do a lot of sale shopping and a lot of stocking up and a lot of stocking for that. I'm kind of lucky I have the freezer space to do this because if I didn't, I wouldn't know how I would be doing it. So we do have like two incomes coming into the house. But even then, with 2 kids to feed and everything else, it's astronomical.
I don't buy as many sweets or treats I used to buy. It's more just food that is necessary to get me by. I know I have to have so much money set aside every month for my loan, my insurance, other things. And so that has to be taken care of before I do anything, before I eat, before I pay any other bills. Those main bills have to be paid first. So I've been able to manage. Luckily, I have a fairly decent job, so that helps. I don't know how these people on welfare are getting by, but because I feel I'm making a fairly good wage and I'm still struggling. So yeah, it's got to be tough out there for some people.
I feel like I used to buy a full trunk of groceries. Now $100 won't even cover a seat in my car. Sometimes it's, you decide whether a bill gets paid or if you're getting groceries, and it makes it really hard, especially when you have children. So, social activities get cut back, not traveling as far, spending less for gas, etc. Yeah, I bought maybe 3 bags of groceries the other day, and it was just under $200. I'm really hoping that something happens in the near future, because it's getting harder and harder to make ends meet and, provide for your family. So hopefully our government or somebody can do something to lower the costs.
So those are some grocery shoppers in Ontario talking about inflation and how it's affecting them. And of course, we'll be talking a lot about the price of food and those that need to turn to food banks in Manitoba in just a couple of weeks. 2 weeks from Friday, Make the Season Kind is happening here on our airwaves and across all of our CBC Manitoba platforms. That's a day in partnership with Harvest Manitoba to support Harvest and all of its member agencies. And that means food banks all across the province, as well as meal programs and school programs that they still supplement with. So we'll learn more about the stories and the need locally. And how do we do that and spend the day here on the air? Well, the day is also focused on stories, but live music as well. So musicians are always grateful and willing to lend their voices and their talents to our day of programming here. So we have Make the Season Kind coming up on December the 5th. And this year, I just want to pull out one statistic because you might have missed this. This is over in Brandon. Their food banks there are experiencing huge increases in demand. So this year, one of the food banks, the largest food bank there, says they're providing about 600 more hampers this year than the same period last year. So the need in that city is growing as it is here in the city of Winnipeg. You might have heard Corey on the air yesterday. He was already down at Harvest Manitoba talking to different food bank users. And one of the things that people he met was talking about the fact that they just need a little help. They are, in fact, still working. So that stereotype, that stigma that still persists, that people are using the food bank because, they're unemployed, and they may be, and that's perfectly fine. No stigma around it. But a lot of people, in fact, are employed. They just cannot make ends meet and figure out how to cover things like rents and needs and budgets and food. So we will lean into this story in more details 2 weeks from Friday. Well, if you've been following the news, then you know that an internal investigation has exposed the actions of disgraced Winnipeg police officer Elston Bostock, uncovering years of unethical and illegal behavior. Bostock is an officer of 22 years on the force locally. He pleaded guilty to breach of trust, theft, and indignity to human remains. He admitted to stealing drugs from a crime scene, to bribing officers to fix traffic tickets. He took a photograph of a topless dead woman and then shared the picture with fellow officers. While Bostock still faces other charges, his guilty plea has put a spotlight on the Winnipeg Police Service and asks how many officers took bribes from Bostock over the years, and how many other Winnipeg police officers looked the other way and didn't turn him in sooner. Zane Tessler, former civilian director of the Independent Investigation Unit of Manitoba, the IIU, was talking about this with guest host Marjorie Dowhouse on Up to Speed recently.
What has been exposed in this particular instance is just almost a shopping list of how corruption can occur in law enforcement. You have almost every single example of corruption. I think at the very least, one would expect that police officers who are sworn to enforce laws, to maintain public safety, to build community trust, would take the highest road possible to ensure that the actions of themselves and their compatriots is above reproach. I think what caught my eye is the fact that other officers were so easily persuaded to violate their own oath, to cancel tickets and do other things for $20 coffee cards. I mean, it's ridiculous just how cheap justice can be taken at times, or the lack of justice can be bought in this regard. So the level of corruption goes beyond the main officer who's at the top of the hill, but as you go down the different layers and strata, corruption just pervades a number of officers, and its effects will be long-standing for some time to come.
Rune Glomseth is an associate professor emeritus with the Norwegian Police University College. She's a former officer as well, and author of Police Leadership, a Norwegian Approach. He joins us via Zoom to weigh in on this, as he's weighed in on the past on the service, and so he has some understanding as well of his police service and ours here. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
So what do you think about the Bostock case in so much as what you've heard, and also what Tessler had to say just now about corruption?
I agree that this is a menu of typical police corruptions. And I also agree on his way of saying it. One person is an example, but what about the others? That is my foremost thoughts now.
How are Norwegian officers taught about corruption when they go to university? Because one of the reasons you were on the show before, you and I were talking about how much training officers where you live get, which is drastically different from how long officers are trained here. We're talking some months versus years and years. So what is the actual training around corruption in Norway?
Well, I will go back to my own training in 1982 and 83. We had training in ethical behavior and integrity during the training. It was case studies and discussions. Now it is much more professionalized, and they have it as a team going through the whole education of 3 years. So it's a very, very substantial part of the police education and the training. And also, when they are out in practice, they regularly discuss ethical problems, ethical dilemmas concerning the police role and the police practice.
Is there a similar case involving an officer around corruption in Norway when you're hearing about the case here in Winnipeg?
I've been looking back now, and there is one main case from 2014. It was a police officer, a very well-known, experienced police officers. He was called, the case is called the Kaplan Jensen case. And the police officer, Eirik Jensen, was arrested in 2014 and charged with gross corruption and involvement in large-scale drug trafficking. And he was sentenced to 21 years in prison, and of course losing his role as a police officer. This is the most important and the biggest case in Norway last years. So it went up to the Supreme Court, and then in November 2020, they made the conviction legally binding. So this is a very spectacular case, and it very much discussed in Norway. And we also have a lot of allegations. People who are in contact with the police, they are reporting police officers for corruption. And then there is a special agency without the police who are looking after the police, and they have regularly found that there is no corruption. But the case from 2014 is a very high-profile case, and we also have 2 cases from 2011.
When you spoke about how officers where you are trained, during their time around corruption, and how it's personalized now and it's all the way thread through 3 years and different aspect of the training for officers, you talked about ethics when it comes to corruption. But are officers trained to resist and report corruption? Is that how does that factor in?
Yes, this is. They are also trained to do that, to report it, and it is a special channel to do it within the police and also outside the police. So also the trade union, the police trade union, has been very much in front of this thing. So of course the police has a very loyal culture, and it is some kind of barrier from one person to go to report another one, but that happens, and it's very important, of course, that people within the police can report improper practice and unlawful practice.
When that happens, how is reporting misconduct, if an officer does so, facilitated for a police officer in Norway?
One can report it to a special organization, or you can report it within the police district, and then it is up to the chief of police to decide if this is going to the special organization, or say no, this is nothing that we shall follow up.
What kind of a sanction, if an officer is reported and then caught later, what are some of the sanctions that they might face? You were citing already some of what happened there, but is 21 years in that case that you highlighted and losing the job, it went all the way to the Supreme Court, is that an example of what does that say to you, I guess, that sentence?
It's very important, and I can mention the two cases from the Norwegian Supreme Court from 2011. The one case, a police officer was sentenced to 1 year and 6 months in prison and a permanent loss of police employment. The other case he was also convicted for gross corruption, sentenced to 8 months in prison and permanent loss of police position. So there you have how serious it is and how it is treated.
What advice might you have for the Winnipeg Police Service here where I live going forward, now that these actions have been exposed, about moving forward and regaining the trust of the public and also changing the service?
I think I could give two advices. One is putting ethics and ethical behavior and integrity and professional integrity in policing as an important theme in the education and training of police officers. The second one is that every police district should have this on the agenda, put this on the agenda and discuss cases, dilemmas, and so on, and put it like near to the profession. That is the best two advices I can give.
Thank you very much for your insight. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me.